My name is Joe Peroni, and this is the Rise Above Project. And today I'm going to answer the question, do people choose to be depressed? Now, I know on the surface that question seems to be a little bit disrespectful, but as we go on throughout the show, we're going to find out some more information, and it might not be that disrespectful. So let's start off with some anecdotal evidence that we can all participate in. So do you know someone who chooses to listen to sad music? You know, like Adele or something like that. I can't imagine people who can listen to her all day. But anyway, that's another story. Do you know someone who chooses to read sad stories? Do you know someone who chooses to wear only dark clothes? Do you know someone who watches dark, sad movies? Now, I know a lot of people too that they like forensic files and things like this. I find it really difficult to find any entertainment value in watching show after show about dead people and, who killed them and all these, graphic details on dead bodies and stuff like that. And I'm just not that type of person, but I know that there's a lot of people out there who are. Do you know people out there who choose to be critical of themselves, critical of other people, critical of the world, and critical of the future? Do you know someone who magnifies problems instead of solutions? Do you know someone who only recognizes the negative in every situation? And do you know someone who tends to be more critical than complimentary? Now, I think we all know somebody like this or many people like this, but that's only anecdotal evidence. It doesn't mean that much. So let's get into the empirical evidence. I want to reference a study today by Maya Tamir and her colleagues. This study was published in Psychology Science. So let's start off with emotional regulation. The definition is the process of changing one's current emotions into more desirable emotions. Now here's where it gets tricky right from the start, because most people would assume that a desirable emotion is happiness, but that's not necessarily true for most people, as this study is going to show. In this study, what they did was they have two strategies in order to help people regulate their emotions. So they trained them with these two strategies. And number one was cognitive reappraisal. And this is when you can rethink or change the meaning of situations to generate a different emotion. You can think of it as like looking for the silver lining in something. For example, I'll use myself as an example. In 2007 and 2008, there was a recession/depression, and I lost a large percentage of my business, as did most people. But I tried not to get down and depressed and focus on the negative. With all that extra free time, I thought, yes, this is a great moment to go back to school, because I always wanted to go back to school, but I just didn't either have the time or make the time. Now I had no excuse. So now when I look back at the recession/depression, 2007, 2008, I looked at it as a renewal, a transformative growth in myself, because I went back to school. I don't look at the recession as this terrible, sad, depressing type of time in my life. Again, cognitive reappraisal. So number two, situation selection, where you can choose positive stimuli, such as positive books, movies, music, comedy routines, choosing some type of activity over just sitting around doing nothing. Here's how the study went. So there's a group of depressed people and a group of what they called healthy subjects. And they were both trained on these two ways to change your emotions. Again, cognitive reappraisal and situation selection. Interesting though, this is what happened. The result was that depressed people chose on purpose, willfully and willingly, to engage with negative stimuli. Again, they went and they tried to look for negative books, negative music, negative anything. They chose inaction rather than inaction. And they chose not to reframe situations to be positive or look for silver linings. Again, they went out of their way to look for the negative. So this becomes problematic in a couple of ways. In other words, if someone's sad or depressed and you teach them techniques in order to change their emotions, unfortunately, the more skillful they get at changing their emotions and the more educated they get on how to regulate their emotions, they choose and they use the skills that they have to feel more sad and more depressed. So that's a difficult way out of sadness and depression, because the more we teach, then the easier it is for them to stay in depression. So we kind of have this vicious circle here. Now, to be more clear, so you don't think this is all just my opinion, I'm going to read this straight from the study. This is from the discussion. And it's very damning evidence here. It says, our findings suggest that regardless of how well depressed people implement emotion regulation strategies, they choose to implement them in a direction that is likely to maintain or to increase sadness rather than alleviate it. In 3 studies, using 2 emotion regulation strategies, and I've mentioned those to you, we demonstrated that compared with non-depressed participants, depressed participants directed emotion regulation toward experiencing more intense sadness. Although they could avoid sad images, depressed participants chose to view them more frequently than non-depressed participants. Although they could listen to happy or neutral music, depressed participants were more likely to choose to listen to sad music. Although they were trained in using cognitive reappraisal to decrease or increase reactions to sad pictures, depressed participants chose to increase reactions to sad pictures almost twice as often as non-depressed people. This pattern could not be attributed to differences in the ability to use reappraisal, perceived difficulty, or effort. Across studies, depressed participants chose to engage with stimuli that they rated as making them feel moderate to intense sadness. Their choices could not be attributed to differential reactivity to sad stimuli. Furthermore, effects persisted when controlling for current emotions and could not be attributed to mood congruency. Interesting stuff here. So then the question also becomes, does a sad person go out of their way to choose sad music? Well, according to the study, they're saying more likely than not, that's not the way it works. What happens is a person goes out of their way to choose sad music, whether they're sad or not, they actually try to make themselves more sad. It doesn't sound logical. So let's ask ourselves the question, why are depressed people more likely to experience sadness? And there's many reasons, or could be reasons, and I'm sure somebody out there may have more than I have. I've got 4, and you can put them in the comments section if you want. So I'm going to go with low self-esteem as number 1, because some people, they feel like they deserve to feel bad, or they deserve to feel sad, and they don't deserve to feel happy. Also, depressed people tend to be familiar with their sadness, so it's congruent with their identity. In other words, they don't identify something as saying that situation was sad, or with this happened to me a long time ago and that made me feel depressed. They feel like they are a depressed person, so they own the identity of being a depressed human being. So if they're not depressed, then they lose their identity, and then they start scouring the world looking for ways to be depressed. Now we all know, emo type people. We all know that there's genres of music related to this. In the late 80s, everything was all about glam, happy, big hair, spandex, fluorescent colors. And somehow, some way, I don't know how it happens, that somebody else with a higher pay grade than me, grunge came out. And it became the in thing to wear dark, drabby clothes, to walk around always sad, to somehow make it like that's a virtue, to talk about how you want to kill yourself and, you know, the gun imagery and everything else. So we know this with grunge music, it still lasts today. I have no idea personally how that got popular, unless sad people would definitely gravitate towards that and they would feel somehow connected to their sadness. It would bolster their identity. And then to go to these shows and know that they're popular, maybe they could feel a sense of oneness with other people who are also identified as being sad. Let's look at number 3. We have to understand emotional regulation goals. Because the more we teach skills and tools to people to not be sad, or we teach them skills to change their emotions, there are many people who desire to be sad. So they use these exact skills to get worse, not better. Now, when I say the term worse, it means because most people would assume that happiness is better than sad. But that's not necessarily true for some people. Some people are making the goal to be sad. They use those skills and they think they're using it in a good way. Emotions, technically, are not good or bad. They're either productive or unproductive. And some depressed people, they believe that their feelings of sadness and depression are productive. Again, it ties them into their identity. And then it moves me into the 4th reason that I think sometimes people believe depression has benefits, such as other people feel sorry for them. Other people have sympathy for them. They get attention this way by being sad and depressed. And they also have low expectations for themselves, and other people have low expectations for them. So they don't have to really put themselves out there. They don't have to worry about trying to succeed a lot of times and failing and being depressed. They already start off from the position of being sad and depressed, and they don't even try in the first place. So it's a type of victim mentality that they actually think serves them, but technically it doesn't, but they believe it does. I hope you found today's information interesting to you and valuable, although you can disagree with it. As a matter of fact, if you were to ask me, do people choose to be depressed? I would say that there are, and there are studies that indicate that, such as this one. But I'm also skeptical because I also have this feeling that it's not necessarily chosen and it's willful, and somebody actually does a profit and loss statement and decides to be sad. What I think sometimes it is that people have this unconscious neurotic drive that they do things, but they're not actually figuring it out. In other words, if you ask a person, why do you listen to Adele all day and make you sad? Why do you listen to or watch shows about death and dying and it makes you in a bad mood? They'll say, I don't know. And that might be an honest answer at that time, that they honestly don't know why they gravitate towards sadness. So I do believe, yes, people do choose to be depressed. I do know people like that, and studies do indicate that. But I also would say that there is probably for many people an unconscious neurotic drive to their sadness and depression. My name is Joe Peroni. This is the Rise Above Project. Please subscribe and tell a friend. Thank you.